Ata ibn Yasar radiallahu anhu said that when the dead wakes up in his grave, the first thing that will come to him are his deeds. So the deeds will strike his thigh and wake him up and say, Ana amaluk, I am your deeds. So then the man will say, where's my family? Where are my kids? Where are my people? Where is what Allah has given me? And the deeds will say, you have left your family, you've left your children, you've left your people and all that Allah has granted you behind you. And you're not going to live in this grave except with me. So then the man will say, Laytani athartuka ala ahli wa waladi wa ashirati. Woe to me, I wish I would have preferred you over my family, my children, my people, and everything Allah granted me, since nothing will live with me now except for you. The Prophet ﷺ famously said, 3 things follow you to your grave: your wealth, your family, and your deeds. Your wealth and your family turn back, but your deeds stay with you. That's in regards to your worldly family. But you'll notice something else in the narrations about the Barzakh. Everyone else visits you and you visit them, but you only actually live with your deeds. The Prophet ﷺ said that when you see your deeds, you would already know from the look of them what type of news they bring you. So you're either awakened by some beautiful human form or a really ugly one, and that's based on how you made them. Our deeds are the most important thing we're going to send forward into the Barzakh. They protect you, they accompany you, they live with you, and in some cases, they save you. And when we hear about the punishment of the grave and the terrifying aspects, and then look at our life and our deeds, we may not feel like we measure up. A lot of people feel very disconnected and so far away from those actions that bring a person salvation. But like with everything else, it's important to focus on the fundamentals. So the Prophet ﷺ said, the most beloved deeds to Allah are the consistent ones, even if they're small. You don't realize, but every time you're making wudu for the sole purpose of pleasing Allah, those could be washing your future self from sins that would have otherwise incurred the punishment of the grave. And what you're going to notice when we get into the specific punishments of the grave is that they're usually bad habits that people have that accumulate into eventually becoming major sins. Also remember that the grave is a place for purification for some of the believers so that they don't have to be purified in the hereafter. And for others, it's a preview of what's worse and is yet to come. Now, many of us are familiar with the long hadith of Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj where the Prophet ﷺ mentions the specific deeds that bring about punishment for a person. There's also this long, beautiful narration that Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said we should memorize, where the Prophet ﷺ goes through the specific things that save you in the grave. He says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I saw a thirsty man from my nation who was being turned away from every water basin. And then fasting during the month of Ramadan approached him and it quenched his thirst. So I want you to think about when you hold yourself back from drinking water on a hot day and you're fasting, and how amazing that first sip of water is at iftar. Imagine how much sweeter that sip of water is in the Barzakh after the long expedition into the grave. Also, one of the things that the scholars mention of the wisdoms of this is that in Jannah, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever drinks wine in this world will be forbidden from it in the hereafter. But you forbade yourself from wine here, so you get to drink it in Jannah. Now likewise in Barzakh, you forbade yourself from water here during your fasting, so Allah lets you have it there instead. He then says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I saw a man from my ummah with darkness beneath him, while prophets were gathered in circles. Whenever he approached a circle, he was turned away. But then his ghusl, his bathing from a state of janaba, took him by the hand and sat him next to those circles. And this is the blessing of following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, because who doesn't love a shower? But you find yourself in ease here and there just for following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But let's also realize that for some people, if it's cold and they live in a place where it's hard to get hot water, or it's hot and it's hard to get cold water, ghusl can be extremely difficult. But they immerse themselves in that water for the sake of Allah, so Allah immerses them in the circles of the prophets. Then the Prophet ﷺ says, I saw a man from my ummah and he was lost in darkness. Then his Hajj and his Umrah came and they pulled him into the light. Now I want you to think about Hajj and Umrah. Is there any experience in Islam that's more immersive than Hajj and Umrah? In Hajj and Umrah, you are literally surrounded by light. In every direction you look, you see something that reminds you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see the Kaaba, you see Zamzam, you see Safa, you see Marwa, you see Arafah, you see the other Hujjaj that are dressed in white that remind you of your death. So it's only fitting that Hajj and Umrah would give you light in a space of darkness. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, and I saw a man from my ummah who was trying to avoid the fire, and then his sadaqah came, his voluntary charity came, and it shielded him from the fire. Now I want you to think about what that means in dunya. The scholars say, just as your charity protects others from the hardship of this life, it will be a shield for you from the fire in the grave. And of course, when you rise up on the Day of Judgment, it becomes, as the Prophet ﷺ said, your shade from the sun. Then he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I saw a man from my ummah who was going up to believers and he was speaking to them, but they wouldn't respond to him. Then his silatul rahim, his establishing the ties of kinship came, and they said, O believers, this one maintained the family ties that Allah made sacred. So speak to him. So the believers look at him and they start to shake his hand and they start to speak to him. Now, subhanAllah, this one's so powerful because how many people abandon their family for their friends in this life? And now the believers are befriending you in the Barzakh because you maintained your family ties. So again, it's the complete opposite of what we're used to in this dunya. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, I saw a man from my ummah who was saved from the angels of punishment, and instead he joined with the angels of mercy because of the good which he used to command and the evil which he used to forbid. Now when you do amr bil ma'roof and nahi anil munkar, enjoining good and forbidding evil, what are you effectively doing? You're protecting the deen, you're safeguarding the sunnah, you're speaking out against the oppressors and protecting the oppressed. So Allah will reward you by sending you angels of mercy to protect you from angels of punishment. And then he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I saw a man from my ummah kneeling before a curtain between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then his husn al-khuluq, his good character came, and it took him by the hand and it placed him before Allah. The closest person to Allah is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the closest of you to me will be those of you who have the best character. And the hadith goes on to mention other manifestations of good deeds that save you later on in the journey. But here's the thing, Allah isn't just fair, He's merciful. He knows the deeds you wanted to do but couldn't, and the deeds you wish you could have done better. And He expands those deeds to unimaginable rewards. You know, I was speaking to a cousin of mine who lives in Gaza, and he was saying, we've never been allowed to go to Al-Aqsa, and it's right around the corner. Can you imagine, subhanAllah, the cruelty of that? And he said, and we've never been allowed to do Hajj or Umrah, and you people get to go from America. And he even said, you guys get to do da'wah, and we don't get to do da'wah because we don't have anyone to do da'wah to. And I'm like, you're doing the greatest da'wah just by being yourselves. But you know what? He said, we know that we are also murabitun. We are those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen to be the guards of Islam by refusing to give up this land. And I want you to think about this hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said alayhi salatu wasalam that every dead person's deeds are sealed at the time of death, except for the one who stands guard in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His good deeds continue to expand until the Day of Judgment, and he is protected from the fitna of the grave. SubhanAllah, think about this. He guarded the territory of Islam, so Allah guarded the territory of His good deeds. And Allah in His mercy will take your smallest good deed and increase it so long as you are sincere. But on the other hand, you may have some things to rectify before you can reach that bliss. Perhaps you had a minor sin that you took lightly, or there was a person that you hurt more than you thought you did, or there was a major sin that will wait for the intercession of the Prophet ﷺ on the Day of Judgment. But the hard work it takes to root these issues out with whatever few moments you have left on earth is so much less painful than having to try to deal with them once you get to the Barzakh.